I mean, I know my.
With me, who are you guys? Well, you guys are. Yeah. But anyway, glad you're here.
All right, let's just.
There is. It's yeah. That's of having these.
I think to me where they were best, where they were best in.
Yeah, which is I think that's yeah.
I guess like so the background for this is like
games.
Yeah,
Video games.
Yeah,
A video game?
There was I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I know the feeling. Every time I want to express myself, it always feels like or like it's as if is the sound of my brain churning on ideas or trying to arrange them to be expressed. Really, all expression is the process of taking in, mixing up, and releasing out. Eating, digesting, expelling, input, process, and output. But to be honest, I have something I've been trying to express for a while. And it's something that can't be done by blogging or in a drawing or by making a game, apparently. So it's time for a podcast. This is Critical Cast Episode 2, and the theme is expression. Not just expression in game design, but expression in any artistic medium. And what does it mean to express oneself? What does it do to a person, and how it works? And to get my point across to you, I'm planning on sharing a talk I gave at a game design conference, a few stories here and there, sound bites from the gaming discourse, which you've heard at the top of this podcast, a few interviews, but more interestingly than all of that, I'm going to use an audio metaphor. So let's get started. What do you need to do? The only other thing you really need is a pair of headphones to listen to this podcast. Trust me, you'll want some headphones, so do that now. On December 17th, 2012, I found myself standing in front of a small crowd of conference attendees. I took off of work and flew halfway around the nation to give a talk on game design, and I chose the topic of game design innovation. My talk is titled, A Crash Course in Innovation. And this is the description. Innovating in game design is tricky. It can be as simple as making the smallest player interaction more consistent, or it can be as grand as defining a genre. Innovation doesn't guarantee financial success, a quality product, or imitators. In this workshop, I explain why designers should care about innovation, and the method I use to refine, repair, and innovate. This isn't a light-hearted, feel-good thought piece. It's time for a game design gut check. And this is how I introduced myself in the talk. My name is Richard Terrell. I'm also known as the Crazy Kirby Kid, or just Kirby Kid for short. I've worked as a game tester, a game design consultant, and an indie developer. I'm particularly proud of my blog, Critical Gaming. Over the past 5 years, I've written around 600 articles, well over 700,000 words, and developed a glossary of over 450 terms, all with a primary focus on game design. That's a lot of words. A lot of words. Like 2 large hardback textbooks worth of material. Like the 3 largest Harry Potter books combined. Or it's about as many words as in the Bible. And there's no doubt that I have the drive to express myself on game design, but I wonder who else we'll be hearing from. The first one is Dr. George DeForest.
Hi, Richard. Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, you looking good.
Yeah.
He is my old piano teacher that I had in high school, and just been keeping in touch over the years, even though I stopped consistently playing back in 2005. Piano has been a big influence on me, so I just wanted to introduce him. And I think it's better that you just listen to this instead of me delivering any kind of long-winded description. Oh, yeah. This is nice. I think it's Schubert. I could listen to this stuff forever. But we have to move on, and there's a lot of work to do, so I'll just let this music play in the background as I introduce David Haynes.
So where would you like to begin? Do you have a startup question, or do you want me to throw out an idea?
Who is my old fiction writing professor from SMU, and he is the author of 6 critically acclaimed novels and 5 children's books. He has been recognized as one of America's best young novelists, and he has been featured on NPR Selected Shorts. And last but not least, we have Michael Abbott, otherwise known as the Brainy Gamer.
Hey, Richard. How you doing, man?
And he is a professor of theater at Wabash College, and he has been blogging on his blog, Brainy Gamer, since 2007, which is about the same time that I started blogging. So he's been sort of a forerunner and mentor in the blogging space for me.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Michael, and I'm happy to have you with me as always.
So what does it mean to innovate? The dictionary says to innovate is to create something new or something changed. By this definition, innovation has a very broad range of meaning, allowing us to innovate by simply tweaking anything within a game, any game element. But the bigger question that I asked or posed is, why should a game designer care about innovation? Sure, new things have that shininess that helps them get attention in sales, but appealing to the familiar also has strong appeal. So why worry so much about innovation? Why should a game designer seek it out? And here was my best answer. If you want to create video games to capture, express, and present your ideas that are unique, then it's clear you need some innovation to represent your uniqueness. And because innovation can also solve problems, it helps us convey our ideas and experiences more effectively. To convey our unique ideas and experiences more effectively, huh? I guess that assumes it's pretty difficult to express ourselves in the first place. And the more unique we are, the more innovative, customized, or tweaked the elements we use need to be. But now the question is, where do we start? Here is Dr. DeForest, the piano teacher. Here's what he had to say.
Talking about fundamentals and how important that is for building up any kind of creative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
you have to have tools. Any kind of technical aspect of a creative endeavor, like playing piano. I can teach anybody basically how to play piano. I work with special needs students to people who are, I have like an adult lady in her 50s who's learning how to play piano. And she'll learn how to play. And so do my special needs students. They learn how to play. But I can only give tools when it comes to like the creative aspects, like composition and so forth. I learned pretty early on that even if you were going to teach somebody composition, you teach composition by analyzing the music of composers and understanding their process and how they relate ideas and seeing what their finished product was and kind of delving into that, understanding structure and form and all these different things. But, when it comes to having an original idea or having some kind of idea that you're going to work with, to put all this vast array of knowledge that you have to work, I can't give you that. Because that would be my idea, not yours. And I don't know of any way to tell somebody how to generate an idea. I think that's just individual. Every person has to find out for themselves. For some people, it's going and taking a walk. You know, for the people, it's having a fight with their loved one. You know, I mean, everybody's different. You know, where the idea comes from, I don't know, but you can't teach somebody that. You can let them know that it's possible, but you can't teach it to them.
So according to Dr. DeForest, we have to have some tools, and teachers can only give these tools, and then we have to use these tools to analyze the works of others, and hopefully good works. So we have to have our own unique ideas and emotions too, and experiences that make us individual. Well, I've got a pile of tools here, but each of them works for a specific medium, so I need to know what medium we're working with. And as far as games go, the next big question that I ask in the talk is, what is a game? And when I say game design, I specifically talk about the design of games. I found Jesper Juhl's definition from his book Half Real to be the best. Juhl defines games as a rule-based system with a variable and quantifiable outcome, where different outcomes are assigned different values, the player exerts effort in order to influence the outcome, and the consequences of the activity are optional and negotiable. Each part of this definition is important to how we move forward in this discussion. We're interested in rules, how outcomes are scored, and how players exert effort. The purpose of gameplay is to communicate ideas and create experiences through interactive gameplay challenges. And the best way to understand what makes gameplay and game design great is to focus on these challenges. For there are many examples of interactive software, teaching activities, and challenging activities, but the greatness of games lies in the combination of these elements.
So in Half Real, you talked about how games were essentially simple rules, right?
Yeah, well, I talked about how games were rules, but they were also sort of fictions at the same time. So that book was really about trying to reconcile those different perspectives on the game. So especially in video game theory, there's this debate that's been raging for a while between whether games should be understood as sort of story worlds or whether they should be understood as sort of rule-based systems. And that book was really trying to say, look, it's both at the same time, and here's how it works.
Did you catch that? It sounds like, for video games, they are a combination of two halves, with one side being the rule-based systems, and the other side being the fictions that we interpret from the visuals and the sounds. So in other words, there's a very mathematical, strict, some would say cold, technical side of video games, alongside a squishier, warmer, more emotional side. And understanding how games work, we have to understand how these two halves work together. Now we must consider how games work. As game designers, we can create specific effects and experiences for the player through the way we construct the game's parts. And even without learning how games are actually programmed, there are a lot of technical details a game designer needs to understand. And once you understand these details and parts, you can better construct a game to create a new and better experiences in the ways that enhance what's good about gameplay, and thus innovate in game design. Here's where we do a gut check, or at least I had to 5 years ago. Back then I had so many ideas for games and so many gaming experiences I wanted to describe and create. I talked about my ideas with friends and drew diagrams, and like so many designers I dreamed big. Unfortunately, all of that dreaming did not build up my game design skills or my ability to articulate my ideas. A dreamer is not an innovator. Thinking up cool scenarios did not mean that I was actually thinking like a game designer. Why? Well, because the ideas I formed in my mind were mostly just a lot of emotions and vague ideas. Two things that do not translate well when trying to create something using the medium in the real world. As an inspiring game designer, I owed it to myself and my ideas to learn how to properly think in ways that would produce actual games and actual innovation. 5 years ago, I knew that I had ideas inside of me that I wanted to express. I wanted to take my ideas seriously by explaining them in words. So my method of innovation started with my blog, Critical Gaming. I started blogging in a topic area that I was comfortable in, story critique and language. I critiqued reviews, wrote a few articles on BioShock and Zelda, and addressed a few other simple topics. But after a few months of writing, I knew I had to buckle down and tackle actual game design topics, because story is not gameplay. I needed to be able to answer a big question lingering in the back of my mind. Why is Super Mario Bros. Such a well-designed game? If I couldn't explain why a classic like Super Mario Bros. Is great, then it was highly unlikely that I would be able to explain why the ideas in my head were great. At the time, it seemed so simple. All I had to do was explain what I thought and felt in words. But I found myself struggling to explain even the simplest gameplay challenges in Super Mario Bros. It was easy to describe what Mario did on the screen, but it was much harder explaining the method behind the design, explaining why Mario works. I could see the structure, but I couldn't grasp it. Wait a minute. So video games are made of parts, and these many parts are assembled in a particular kind of structure? Structure. This seems to be a very important part of all art, not just video games. And here is what Michael Abbott, the video game blogger, had to say on structure.
It has to do with when something feels like a sound idea that has a I don't know if structure is the right word, but that there's a reason why we spell playwright with a W-R-I-G-H-T, that you're building something. And I think that if you can keep that as the focal point as an artist, that you're never, even painters are building things, you know, we're always building things. That's the common language for me that helps me access games, because I think game designers have a pretty powerful understanding of that millwright, boatwright, you know, kind of characterization, an artisan who builds things. So, you know, in some ways, it's not a very intellectual process. I mean, it is, obviously, but things that are built well because they're watertight, and they have a structure.
So it sounds like every time I want to express myself well, I need to think in terms of building something solid, where parts lock into place and support each other. Whether I'm making a video game, writing an article, composing a song, or building this crazy audio metaphor, I must understand the parts and how they work together in a structure. But how do we understand the parts of something that we can't see or touch? How do we wrap our brains around the parts of a video game? Well, let's go back to my game design talk for the answer. I had terms like level, mechanic, combo, risk, but not much else. At one point I thought that my problem was that I didn't have the vocabulary to express my ideas. My problem wasn't that I lacked some kind of game design dictionary. I realized that I couldn't find the words to accurately describe what I was thinking because I didn't understand how games worked. It was kind of embarrassing to think that after playing video games since I was about 2 years old, chatting on game forums, and dreaming up my own games, that I couldn't even explain the basics of a 20-year-old platformer. The language we use to talk about game design not only helps us write about games, it brings order to the way we think. A good term with a clear definition works like a light in the dark rooms of our minds, illuminating the edges of our understanding. while marking the boundaries between concepts. Without a clear language, it can be extremely difficult to convey what's in our heads. Language works to untangle the ball of feelings, emotions, desires, and vague ideas we've rolled up over time. So apparently words are important. Well, not necessarily words, but being able to break down any medium into smaller parts where you can clearly understand how each part works. But words are particularly effective for this kind of thing because we use words to explain things to ourselves and we think in words. And I'm not the only one who thinks that we are lacking a bit of language when it comes to talking about games. Michael Abbott, the Brainy Gamer, in a recent post titled Emotional Experience Through a Gameplay World, talked about the same thing. And at the top of the post, he has a quote by Kenneth Burke that says, "The nature of our terms affects the nature of our observations." And this is very much echoing the same things that I talked about in my talk. So I just want to lift a few good quotes out of Michael Abbott's article before moving on. Michael says, "We need a better way to write about games. We don't need a new form of journalism. I'm not seeking the Lester Bangs or the Pauline Kael of video games. My point is much simpler. We need more words. Creative designers are building games, inviting us to find a language and critical approach to convey their essential meaning, or if not meaning, then what they are, what they do, new tools or refined tools for new games. We can go about this in several ways, but maybe the best place to start is to think about our critical lexicon. We need new words, or better words, or simply different words. We've worn out the old ones." I couldn't agree more. We have worn out this old style of talking about video games, or at least as a whole that's what appears to be happening. Which is why I think the title of the Brainy Gamer's post is particularly brilliant. Emotional Experience Through a Gameplay World. It's like he took all of the overused, most common, and at the same time most general terms that people use to talk about video games and shoved them all into one complete statement.
In the light platforming, the challenge is slight. Like Flower, that game company's previous title, Journey favours affecting experiences over systems of reward and punishment.
Journey is more about the emotional investment than the usual missions and scorekeeping video games use nowadays.
Then the story offers more emotional heft than you might be prepared for.
It's about experimenting with the sort of moods you can get out of simple gameplay.
It's a unique experience. I haven't played anything quite like it before.
We need new tools, eh? So it sounds like words and the language that we use to understand our craft are the tools that help us break down the parts and understand the structure at work. So, with the tools we have, we can start to untangle this ball of stuff we have around here. And we do that by explaining things in words, one part at a time. With a precise and finely tuned language, we can break down our understanding of game design into its component parts. Using consistent words to describe the parts of game design helps us recognize the parts in our own design in the works of others. It helps us recognize the unique patterns and connections between a game's parts, which develops a much higher level of knowledge of our craft. In other words, having the language is not just about writing, it's about understanding. It's about communication, and it's about expression. Now you may be wondering, does breaking things down into a precise language really help us? And if it does, by how much and how exactly is this possible? Well, the following conversation is one that I had concerning a master pianist named Fabio Bedini. And I had this conversation with my old piano professor, Dr. George DeForest. And it turns out that this master pianist, Bedini, is my teacher's former teacher.
Yeah, I remember the class with Bedini, of course. I don't know if you've like Googled Fabio or anything like that?
No, I haven't.
Well, you ought to, because now he holds like the most prestigious chair in Germany for teaching piano. I mean, the guy is, he's just off the charts in every respect. I mean, just not only in creative abilities but his intellect. God. I mean, we're talking a towering intellect. This is somebody who can sit there and talk to you in depth on such an array of subjects that it would leave your mind just numb. You know, to have somebody who grasps things so quickly and synthesizes the information and can give it back to you. It's really... And then to watch him work with a little kid. He can sit down and teach a child how to play the piano, which is really a gift.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah. So I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember you didn't do badly. You know, it's not like you
It's like the story of my life. But I remember with Bedini, he could sight read music way better than anybody else I've heard of. Or
he sight reads a finished performance.
Yeah, I don't. I was just talking about him the other day. I was like, remember the guy who could sight read better than I could play, like, no matter how long I practiced? And I guess he's an exception in that regard, or...
Well, not in the class of pianists that he's in. There's not a whole lot of people in the world that can do like he does. But, I mean, yeah. He's a rare individual.
Yeah, it may have been a little bit skewing from my perspective to think that everybody was like him. Because I remember thinking, like, if he could sight read like that, then there's a little hope.
Oh, yeah, but, you know, we're talking, you know, tons of experience. And he won 11 competitions in Italy, and that's before he started really doing big international competitions. And he won every international competition he was in except for one. Yeah, I can understand how that might skew your vision, but really it should have been more of a lesson of what's possible.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really just what's possible. And he is an exception. And he worked very, very hard for many, 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 many years to be able to do the things that he does. It didn't fall from the sky. Although the talent that he has and the creative ability he has, that does fall from the sky. You can't teach people that stuff. You can't teach it to
What other kind of things did he do? Like, creatively? Does he have a lot of compositions, or does he write a lot?
Well, he has a doctorate in composition from, like, Bologna, University of Bologna. And so that's what his music education is in composition. And so, I don't know that he composes anything. But I tell you what, that's a big part of his ability to read.
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, he sits down. I mean, he looks at a page of music, and he apprehends the entire thing.
I'm Googling Fabio Bedini right now to give you a little sample of what he sounds like when he plays piano. And here it is. But the important part I wanted you to know is that this master piano player, he studied the tools and the parts of piano, particularly to get his doctorate in piano composition. And that allowed him access to the entire language of music to where he could understand it on such a deep level that he was able to express himself when he plays to the highest level that we have. And he put in a lot of hard work, but it's important to know that this is what's possible for all of us in any medium. And even if we don't reach the master Bedini levels, it's important to know that we're all on the same road. We're just somewhere along this single road, and it's just a lesson in what's possible for us. There is no denying the positive impact having a detailed language makes. It's empowering and a bit addictive. Once you know one term and experience the clarity it brings, you'll want to learn other related terms as well. And learning in this way has its own sense of momentum.
Yeah, that is so. Yeah, you said it. You said it exactly. I was just taking a shower this morning. I don't know why, but I would have ideas in this shower. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get these? I got 5, I think, pretty viable ideas. When the hell am I going to write these? And I talk to people all the time. And they like, I want to have a blog or I want to write, but I don't know what to write about. Or like, how do you come up with the ideas to write about? So that's the most common question I'm asked all the time. How do you come up with the ideas for your posts? Like, that's the easiest part in the world. Like, my God, it's finding time. That's where I'm in my life. It's finding time.
Michael Abbott also agrees that once you start to express yourself clearly with the right tools, it's hard to stop. It has its own sense of momentum, and you just keep going and going, and it just feeds into itself. But the cool part about learning to properly express oneself with language or through any other medium is that expressing yourself is a way of sorting out your own questions and problems. And this fact is particularly obvious to writers, like my former professor of fiction writing, David Haynes.
So I think in terms of beginning writers, and one of the things that your question sort of points up, is that for many beginning writers, the first step in the door is character, right? And it's character and emotion, and it is it's the use of story to think about and to work through problems in their own experience, right? And so of course you're going to do that in character, right? And that's a perfectly legitimate way in the door. It's also a perfectly legitimate way to write. I mean, many writers work their whole career that way. Their stories are about problems. I'll also say that I think it's the case that from the standpoint of a teacher, you sometimes are looking to find the easiest way in. All right, and so it's the case that for writers who maybe are not going to go much further other than just sort of exploring writing for a short time in their education, the idea of going in with character and going in with writing about your own life and your own situation, your own problems, your own questions in the world is an easy way to get in the door, and then you can use that as a teacher to help push the young writer towards other parts of the craft. You know, let's say they've been writing a story about a particularly messy family life that they've been trying to puzzle through, and so they get that story sort of basically told, and it's kind of melodramatic and very sad. Then you can sort of push them towards, well, you know, let's look at the image pattern here. You've got it turns out that every character in the story is wearing purple, and there are no lights on in any of the rooms. So maybe we can exploit the image pattern. So you get them to think about imagery and think about patterns across the work. You can get them to think about learning how to voice the characters and distinguish the characters by their voices. And so it's all sort of the way in the door. I think that what's true with experienced writers is not that they give up their obsessions either. It's not necessarily the case that a writer who is really driven by voice stops writing voice-driven work and begins to write long lyrical passages. They may write voice-driven passages for the rest of their career, and that's fine. If that's what guides them, right? That's what gets them inside of the fiction, right?
For anybody who is a bit hesitant or apprehensive about really diving into the task of learning the parts and the terms and the rules of game design or any other more technical side of their craft, I think it's important to point out that in this last section we just listened to, that everybody has a different way into the medium of their choice. They always find something that they like and want to express whenever they begin to work inside any medium. But in order to express that idea better, you need to have a more well-rounded, a fuller understanding of the craft. And in pursuing this understanding, you don't have to give up what you like or why you like it. It only better helps you convey who you are. But now we're going to switch gears just a little bit back into game design, and I'm going to give a brief story about how I entered into the entire game design space and sort of the little history on how I started and where I ended up. As I was saying, there's no right or wrong way to start diving into the details and learning things about games and game design that you never knew before. And everybody finds their own way in. My entry point into understanding and developing a language to talk about video games started with story and literary critique. And then I moved away from story design into game design. And the following is a quick run through of my blogging history of game design and self-discovery. In 2008, I started writing about gameplay mechanics, which are player actions, and what it meant to abstract. And this led me to write about what we do with mechanics, which is fight back or overcome obstacles. And I called this interplay, which is a method that gameplay elements have to counter each other and how these counters go back and forth. But before I could talk about level design, I had to be clear about variation and the design space in games. So then I wrote about how these elements are arranged in a level to create challenges. And then I wrote about the different layers in Mario and how they influence the player in different ways, from level obstacles, enemies, coins, power-ups, and secrets. But I couldn't stop there. After I detailed Super Mario Bros. Design, I applied what I knew to other games, and I realized that there were still many more terms and concepts that I needed to express myself. I talked about gameplay dynamics like decaying dynamics, 2D space, 3D space, and charge mechanics and new types of level design like folded level design. Then I wrote about co-op design and how designing for multiplayer brought a unique kind of human dynamic to the mix. And then I continued to review and write about nearly every game that I played. I found that explaining each game's design not only helped me as a designer, but it also helped me as a player. The truth is, my opinion of games are formed through many complex game interactions, and understanding that these interactions come from the rules and design of a game only helps me understand the source of my feelings. So as I learned more about game design, I learned a lot about myself. And then I added more to my understanding of level design with new types of level design and terms to describe level design created from locks, keys, and other obstacles. I was always looking for a clearer, deeper understanding of design. And oftentimes, that meant tweaking my own terms and theories. Then I wrote about mix-ups and play styles and puzzle design, engaging design, elegant solutions, multiple goals, clean feedback design. I did a whole series on skill and intuitive design, real-time versus turn-based design, complexity and emergence, metagames, interesting choices, story, controller design, save systems, the design of fun, the limitations of art, abstraction, and design spaces, metaphors, meaning, and linearity. And as I wrote about these terms, topics, and ideas, I did interviews and I made videos, and I wrote reviews, and everything I did increased my understanding of game design and increased my appreciation of games. And before I realized it, it was 5 years later, and I was standing before a crowd explaining this whole thing. Did you get all that? Hopefully you wrote it all down. What? You didn't write it down? Well, good, because it's all on my blog anyway. I just wanted to give you a sense of how many different kinds of terms and concepts there are in the field of game design. And these are the tools that I use to explain, understand, and appreciate, and even design games for myself. And now we're going right back into my talk. The point that I ended my talk on was this. If you want to innovate in game design, stop trying to innovate in game design. Innovating is the easy part that comes naturally when you have a grasp of the craft. Expressing your unique ideas comes naturally when you learn how to express ideas at all. And this goes with any medium. Again, we're going to jump back to my interview with David Haynes, the fiction writer.
One of the reasons that we read, of course, is for the ideas and to learn about the world. And that as writers, when we start out, we always want to sort of rush towards getting those ideas down as efficiently as possible. And I think one of the hardest things for young writers to learn is that it's the story that's the carrier of the ideas and not the other way around. And that's the really sort of the tough thing to break through. That is to sort of learn how to find the right story to carry the ideas that you want to share, and then to learn how to best tell that story so that the ideas are clearly manifest on the page.
Did you catch that? It's the story that carries the meaning, which means that there's a structure and there are parts that are working well together that allow the emotion and the meaning to come across in the first place. And I think we're starting to see how the two halves, the technical and the emotional side, work together within a medium.
Particularly when we're talking about fiction, right? And if we're talking about essays, or if we're talking about editorials and other kinds of nonfiction writing, yes, it may be the case that you can go more directly towards, here's the idea that I want to give you, and here are the points I'm trying to make. But fiction, of course, is about telling me a story, or telling you a story. And at the heart of that is still, one hopes, there is something substantive. There is some sort of idea or message or deep feeling or deep belief. It's the magic of the artifice is how elegantly, I think, it carries the ideas, or carries the messages that the writer wants to tell. And I think the other thing that writers sometimes struggle with is that I think it's the case that at a certain point, you trust that you have ideas and you start telling a story. I think that many writers, many successful writers, don't start with an idea and say, for example, I'm going to write a story about the great injustices of the world. Instead, they start with, I've got this story that I want to tell. And because one of their deep values, one of the things that they care about and think about on a regular basis would be the deep injustices of the world, those are likely to sort of come through in the fiction in some way. So, I guess that's I think the other important lesson that writers learn over time is to trust your beliefs and your convictions and your ideas and your principles, and know that they will come through, and that allows you to focus on telling a good story.
The idea of trusting my inner motivations and beliefs reminds me of a story between my piano teacher, Dr. DeForest, during one of the piano lessons that I had back in 2004. And it was at a time when I was practicing this particular Chopin etude. Time Dr. DeForest asked me if I wanted to play the song emotionally or technically. And at the time I answered technically, but he stopped me and he told me to start playing it. And after a few measures, he stopped me again and said, "You're playing it emotionally."
I didn't even understand what you were asking, but I really loved that part. I was like, I guess I'm on the other side.
Understanding the question is a really important part of getting to the right answer, right? Yeah, and so that's true. I don't remember that specific example, but that sounds about right. It's like, yes, because to play it technically means to just play all
right in time, and like you can't pause or linger or anything.
Nope, just kind of like note. All the hands moving in the right direction. Everything is well placed. Well coordinated, very matter of fact. good thing is, even like with that first Chopin etude, even if you play it that way, it's still pretty damn impressive. It's just because Bedini actually breathes the music. He breathes just like a singer while he's playing, and that's where I came up with sort of the analogy. It's like you have to sing so hard inside of yourself that it comes out your fingers. And I think a big part of that is that, knowing the notes, knowing the rhythm, having taken what's black and white on the page and completely absorbed it, and then started to work with it. Yeah. Because really absorbing it and getting it like that is really one of my teachers, Mr. Alford, he'd say, well, notes, rhythm, tempo, and all the markings on the page is 0. He says, now if you work hard, you might be able to get up to 70, but nobody's going to care. He says you want to get up in the 90s. That's a whole different level. That's really eating it, drinking it, sleeping it, breathing it, for a long period of time, until it really does become a part of you. It's that kind of absorption.
Now, I don't want to mislead you, and I think I've made it pretty clear that expressing yourself and understanding a medium or learning a craft takes a lot of work. But in this particular interview segment, I don't know if you heard it, but after you do all the hard work of learning a piano piece, where you learn all the notes on the page and all the markings and you pretty much memorize it, you start at 0. And if you do a lot more work beyond that, Dr. DeForest said you get up to 70 and no one cares. It still takes a lot of work, even beyond 70, to get up into the 90s plus region. And I always took that to mean that in order to express yourself and all of your complexity and everything that you value about yourself, you need to do a lot of work in order to get that to come across. And everybody understands sort of intuitively that when you don't do the work to make sure that you come across as clearly as possible and as best as possible, well, nobody really wants to take the time to listen to you sell yourself short. So it takes a lot of work, and it's all about fulfilling your potential and understanding what's possible.
But they always commented on it sounded like such great music, and the musicality, and you really like the music, and contrast that with just the fundamentals and the pure technique and the dedication to get the right notes.
Yeah.
Because that's the dual worlds that I'm always walking.
That's the dual thing that you always walk as a pianist if you're going to perform in public. Mm-hmm. Because you have the most important thing is to project the music. Mm-hmm. And so if you have the right notes and the right rhythm, that's a big part of it, right? Yeah. I mean, so but dropping a note here or there or smudging. I mean, everybody does this. It's just part and parcel of the process. But what really boils down to is, did you move somebody with your playing? Did somebody respond emotionally to your playing? And I even include falling asleep. I had an effect. They fell asleep, but that's good. They stuck around. They didn't get up and leave.
People pay a lot of money to go to sleep a little easier.
Yeah, right. Sure. Exactly. They got a nap and maybe had a pleasant dream. Great. I think that's wonderful. I don't appreciate if they start snoring in the middle, but if you can provide some emotional impact to it, really start to project the structure of the music, because all music, every piece of music that's worth anything has structure. It has its own kind of architecture and its own flow and build to climax and so forth. And so, understanding that and being able to project that, I mean, that's the essence of a great performance.
This episode of Critical Casts has many ideas that I've wanted to express for a long time. And before I end things here, I wanted to make sure that I say them as clearly as I can. Expressing ourselves is something we do naturally and should take more seriously. It's a way of taking the world in and reflecting ourselves back. And through this process, we understand more about the world and ourselves. They say media, news, and art are things to be consumed. But like food or breathing, this consumption is best balanced with a degree of releasing. When I take in so much and expel so little, I can feel a very real kind of pressure. You may not have the tools, the language, the time, or the experience to express yourself the way you want to, but it's absolutely important to try, and to value those who do. I've seen many gamers fight to express and share their opinions with others on the internet, and I've seen many grow exhausted and lose heart trying to communicate. The way we communicate now isn't good enough, and we all seem to know this. The degree that we take expressing ourselves seriously is the degree that we take ourselves seriously. I see no point in fighting for an opinion that you're not willing to clean up or to present clearly. And having a clear language is like a light in the dark places of your mind. It takes away the unsettling vagueness and the frustration of trying to say something, and it gives you the tools to actually speak your mind. The technical side of a craft and the rules at work go hand in hand with the feelings and emotions we want to convey. It's not one or the other. And to be very clear, it's structure and the technical craft first, while trusting that the emotions and beliefs will follow. This is something that I learned the hard way after many, many years of work in various mediums. But the funny part is, I was only able to fully grasp the importance of each lesson after applying it to another medium. So my creative efforts have wrapped back upon themselves. What I learned in piano, I applied to creative writing, which I then applied to game design, and now I'm using these lessons to improve my piano again. So I'm confident about the ideas I've expressed on this podcast. I'm confident that if you take the time to get the tools, more specifically, to learn the terms of game design, your ability to appreciate games will increase dramatically. And believe me, there are some serious drawbacks when you don't have the language to understand games. It's not just about being unable to communicate. Because your observations are shaped by your terms, if you aren't clear about how games work and what makes games great, then your appreciation for game design and gameplay will fade away. But there's no doubt in my mind that we can start learning the terms of game design to boost our industry and our communities, because the teachers and mentors in my life had confidence in me. And this confidence is what I stood on to give a talk at the Game Design Conference last September. And it's with this confidence that I started blogging 5 years ago. And it's with this confidence that I finally finished making this podcast. So maybe all it takes is for someone to express that they believe in you. But to help out, I'm going to leave you with this audio metaphor.
I can only give tools. Analyzing and understanding the process and how they relate ideas and understanding structure and form. All music, every piece of music that's worth anything has structure. It has its own kind of architecture.
We're always building things. That's the common language. They're watertight. They have a structure.
Whether games should be understood as sort of story worlds, or whether they should be understood as sort of rule-based systems. It's both at the same time.
Without a clear language, it can be extremely difficult to convey what's in our heads. We need more words.
It's not that they give up their obsessions either.
I think that's just individual. Every person has to find out for himself.
Innovating is the easy part that comes naturally when you have a grasp of the craft.
It's the story that's the carrier of the ideas and not the other way around. You trust that you have ideas. Trust your beliefs and your convictions and your ideas and your principles, and know that they will come through.
You have to sing so hard inside of yourself that it comes out your fingers. Completely absorbed it, and then started to work with it. Now, if you work hard, you might be able to get upset, eating it, drinking it, sleeping it, breathing it for a long period of time until it really does become a part of you. Did somebody respond emotionally? Did you move somebody? Really, it should have been more of a lesson of what's possible. It's really just what's possible. What's possible.
And that is it for the second episode of Critical Cast. I want to give a special thanks to the people that I interviewed, starting with Dr. George R. DeForest, my piano teacher, Professor David Haynes, and the blogger Michael Abbott, the Brainy Gamer. I also want to give a thanks to Drew Fitz, who helped me program the binaural audio tool that I used to make all the sounds sound like they were happening all around your head. And I want to give a thanks to George Hufnagel, who helped me clean up a lot of the audio that I had for the second episode. He gave me some tips there. The quotes that you heard in this episode came from different videos and audio podcasts from around the internet. There's one from Adam Sessler, there's one from GameSpot's Journey Review, there's IGN's Journey Review, 3 Kilobytes Journey Review, GameSpot's Unfinished Swan Review, Jesper Jules interview, where he was talking about Half Real, the 8-4-Play podcast, the Kickstart My Heart episode, and I want to site where I got a lot of my music and sounds from. All the music and sounds that you hear in the Critical Cast come from video games and or piano players in this case. And you heard some music by Fabio Bedini. That was some Beethoven music. The Aeolian harp music was played by Eleni Treganis, and then the rest of the sound effects came from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Donkey Kong's Crash Course from Nintendo Land, the Wii U menu, Little Big Planet, Katamari Damacy, and the Journey music right there at the end. Do visit Critical Gaming, that's critical-gaming.com, for the slides and transcript of the game design talk that I gave in this show, as well as hundreds of other articles that actually use a precise language to talk about game design. And I assure you there's nothing else on the web that does it quite like I do. I hope you will find something useful from all the hard work that I did over the years. There's an About page on my site where you can get in contact with me. Hopefully you'll have some feedback on my second episode, so that I can make a better decision on how often I can do this in the future. Thanks for listening to Critical Cast Episode 2. This is Kirby Kid, signing out.